You are looking at a plant that can fuel every engine you own. Diesel truck, gasoline car, generator, tractor, lawnmower, every single one. And the Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania are growing it right now legally in the same fields their ancestors planted 300 years ago. After the last video, many of you asked the identical question, what about my gasoline engine? I heard every one of you, and the answer changed everything I thought I knew about fuel, because this one plant does not produce one fuel. It produces two, one for diesel engines, one for gasoline engines. No modifications to the vehicle, no special parts, no trip to a mechanic. And in 2010, the University of Connecticut proved something with a single number that the oil industry wishes you had never seen: 97%. And when you understand what that number means, you will know exactly why this plant was made illegal in 1937. But before we get there, I need to tell you about a document from 1937 that erased this plant from American life for 80 years. About 4 men whose names you already know, and about 2,000 fuel stations that vanished from the Midwest in the same year the law was signed. Stay with me. Even if you already own a house, even if you have never planted a seed in your life, even if you rent your land, because what the Amish showed me about this plant works on a 1/4 acre with a shed and a pickup truck. The first time I drove through East Hempfield Township outside Lancaster, I almost missed the sign Hempfield. I figured it was just one of those old Pennsylvania place names nobody thinks about anymore. I drove another 20 minutes to meet an Amish farmer a friend of mine had told me about. His name was Reuben. Quiet man, strong handshake. Said about 4 words in the first 10 minutes. Then he walked me to the back of his barn, pulled a glass jar off a shelf, and poured something that looked like cooking oil into a small diesel tractor. The engine turned over on the first try. No hesitation, no cough, no black smoke. I stood there for 15 minutes waiting for it to stall. It never did, and when I asked him where he bought the fuel, he looked at me like I had asked the dumbest question in Lancaster County. He pointed to a field behind the barn. I grew it, he said. That was the moment everything changed for me. The plant is hemp. Industrial hemp cannabis sativa. And I need to be clear about something right now, because the confusion between hemp and marijuana was manufactured on purpose. Industrial hemp contains less than 0.3% THC. That is the psychoactive compound. You could smoke an entire bale of industrial hemp and feel nothing but a sore throat. The 2018 Farm Bill made it federally legal to grow, process, transport, and sell industrial hemp anywhere in the United States. It is as legal as corn, as legal as soybeans, as legal as wheat. But for 80 years before that federal bill, hemp was treated the same as a narcotic. And the reason had absolutely nothing to do with anyone getting high. It had everything to do with fuel and money, and 4 men who had more of both than anyone else in America. Let me start with what one plant actually does, because once you understand this, the rest of the story will make you angry. Hemp seeds contain roughly 30 to 35% oil by weight. That oil can be extracted with a simple cold press. The same kind of press people use for olive oil or sunflower oil. Once you have the oil, it can be converted into biodiesel through a basic chemical process called transesterification. You mix the hemp seed oil with methanol and a small amount of lye, which acts as a catalyst. The mixture reacts. It separates into 2 layers. The top layer is raw biodiesel. The bottom layer is glycerin, which you can use to make soap. You wash the biodiesel with water, let it dry, and it is ready to pour into any diesel engine ever manufactured. Not a modified engine, not a special engine, any diesel engine, because the diesel engine was never designed to run on petroleum in the first place. Rudolph Diesel built his engine in the 1890s in Germany. He filed his patent on the 28th of February 1892. His paper was titled Theory and Construction of a Rational Heat Engine to Replace the Steam Engine. He called it a compression ignition engine. The fuel he envisioned was plant oil. In 1900, he demonstrated his engine at the World Exposition in Paris. The French government had asked him to run the engine on peanut oil from their African colonies. He did. The engine ran so quietly, so smoothly, that most of the people watching had no idea it was burning a vegetable oil. Diesel wrote that his engine could be fed with vegetable oils and would help considerably in the development of agriculture. He dreamed of a world where any farmer could grow fuel in his own field. He called it the oil engine, and then he died. On the 29th of September 1913, Rudolph Diesel boarded the post office steamer Dresden in Antwerp, Belgium. He was traveling to England to meet with the British Royal Navy about installing his engines in their submarines. He ate dinner on the ship, he retired to his cabin at 10 in the evening, and left word to be woken at 6:15 the next morning. When the steward knocked, the cabin was empty. The bed had not been slept in. His nightshirt was neatly laid out. His watch was positioned where it could be seen from the bed. His hat and overcoat were found folded beneath the railing at the stern of the ship. 10 days later, a Dutch fishing crew found a body floating in the North Sea. It was too decomposed to identify. They took the personal items from his pockets. His son later confirmed they belonged to his father. The newspapers printed two kinds of headlines that week. Some said suicide, others were darker. Inventor thrown into sea to stop sale of patents to British government. Murdered by agents from big oil trusts. His wife opened a bag he had given her before the voyage. Inside was 200,000 German marks in cash and financial statements showing their bank accounts were virtually empty. In his diary, a cross was drawn on the date September 29. We may never know the full truth about what happened on that ship, but consider the timing. The man who invented the most efficient engine in history, who publicly stated that vegetable oils would become as important as petroleum, who was days away from giving the British Navy an engine that ran on crops instead of crude oil, vanished into the sea. And after he was gone, nobody at the engine companies pushed to keep plant oil as the standard fuel. Nobody asked farmers what they thought. The petroleum companies simply stepped in, adjusted the fuel systems, and made diesel fuel from crude oil the default. Within a decade, every diesel engine in the world was burning petroleum. The engine designed to free farmers became the machine that chained them to an oil company, and nobody stopped to ask why, because the man who would have asked was at the bottom of the English Channel. Now, many of you asked specifically about gasoline engines, your car, your lawnmower, your chainsaw. This is where the second fuel comes in, and this is the part that connects directly to what Henry Ford was trying to tell us almost a century ago. After you harvest hemp seeds for oil, you still have the entire stalk, thousands of pounds per acre of woody fibrous material. That stalk is rich in cellulose. Through a process called cellulose hydrolysis, the cellulose is broken down into simple sugars. Those sugars are fermented. The fermentation produces ethanol, the same type of alcohol that is already blended into the gasoline you buy at the pump right now. Every gallon of regular gas in America contains up to 10% ethanol. That blend is called E10. The only difference is that the ethanol at the station comes from corn. The ethanol from hemp comes from the stalks of a plant that also gave you biodiesel from its seeds. One plant, two fuels, two types of engines, zero waste. Henry Ford understood this before almost anyone in the country. In 1908, his Model T was designed to run on gasoline, ethanol, or any combination of both. Ford told the New York Times in 1925 that the fuel of the future was going to come from fruit, from weeds, from sawdust, from almost anything. He said there is fuel in every bit of vegetable matter that can be fermented and enough alcohol in 1 year's yield of an acre of potatoes to drive the machinery necessary to cultivate the fields for 100 years. By the 1930s, Ford was hosting conferences in Dearborn, Michigan about a movement called farm chemergy. The word comes from chemistry and the Greek word for work. The idea was radical and simple. Let farmers grow the raw materials for industry instead of importing everything from petroleum. Ford put his own money behind it. At his Iron Mountain facility in Michigan, he operated a biomass conversion plant that processed hemp along with other crops. The plant extracted methanol, charcoal, fuel tar pitch, and ethyl acetate, all fundamental ingredients for modern industry, all from plants that grew in a single season. In August 1941, Ford unveiled a prototype car with body panels made from hemp, soy, wheat, straw, and flax bound together with resin. Popular Mechanics featured it. The New York Times reported on it. The panels were lighter than fiberglass. Ford demonstrated the strength on camera by swinging an axe into the trunk lid. The axe bounced back. The panel did not dent. The car was designed to run on hemp ethanol. Ford brought George Washington Carver himself to help with development. He envisioned a vehicle grown entirely from the soil and powered by the same soil. He was 77 years old and swinging an axe at a car he believed would change the world. But by 1941, it was already too late. Something had happened 4 years earlier that buried this knowledge for 80 years. 4 years. That is all it took to erase a plant that had been American for 2 centuries. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was signed into law. Notice the spelling, marijuana with an H. That was a deliberate choice. The word was Mexican slang, and Harry Anslinger, the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, used it because most Americans had never heard it. If he had called the plant cannabis, every doctor in the country would have recognized it. If he had called it hemp, every farmer would have known. By calling it marijuana, he severed the connection between a useful crop and the law designed to kill it. Before taking the narcotics job, Anslinger had publicly stated there was no greater absurd fallacy than the idea that cannabis caused violence. He did not believe it was a problem, but prohibition ended in 1933, and the Department of Prohibition he oversaw was about to disappear. He needed a new enemy. Cannabis became that enemy, and he had friends who needed it gone for entirely different reasons. William Randolph Hearst owned newspaper chains, timberland, and paper mills across the country. Hemp produced paper cheaper and faster than wood pulp. It was a direct threat to his business. The DuPont family had just patented nylon and a new chemical process for making paper from wood. Hemp fiber competed with nylon. Hemp paper competed with the wood pulp process. Andrew Mellon, the Secretary of the Treasury and the wealthiest man in America, had invested heavily in DuPont. Mellon was also Harry Anslinger's father-in-law. He had personally appointed Anslinger to the narcotics position, and then there was Standard Oil, the Rockefeller empire built on petroleum. Hemp oil, as fuel, threatened the foundation of everything they sold. These men did not need to conspire in darkness. They had newspapers, they had Congress, they had the Bureau of Narcotics. Hearst's papers ran front-page stories connecting marijuana to violence, to crime, to racial fear. Anslinger testified before Congress with cases that had no medical evidence behind them. The American Medical Association sent Dr. William Woodward to oppose the act. He told Congress the claims were not supported by science. His testimony was dismissed. After hearings that got almost no public attention, the act passed on the 2nd of August, 1937. Here is the detail that makes 1937 the most important year in the history of American energy, and almost nobody knows it. That same year, a fuel called Agrol was selling at 2,000 service stations across the American Midwest. 2,000 stations from Indiana to South Dakota. Agrol was an ethanol gasoline blend made at a plant in Atchison, Kansas, backed by the same Chemergy movement Ford had championed. 2 blends were available. Agrol 5 had 5 to 7% alcohol. Agrol 10 had 12 to 17.5% alcohol. The plant had been financed by the Chemical Foundation and opened in 1936. By 1937, motorists across the heartland were filling up with it. The brochure said, "Try a tankful, you will be thankful." The fuel worked, it sold. Customers came back, and then the managers of the Atchison plant started reporting something they could not ignore. Sabotage, market manipulation, vicious infighting from the petroleum industry. Agrol sold for 17 cents a gallon. Leaded gasoline sold for 16, a penny difference. The oil industry lobbied against every tax incentive bill that could have closed that gap. The American Petroleum Institute publicly attacked ethanol as inferior fuel. Between 1933 and 1939, petroleum interests killed 19 federal bills and 31 state bills aimed at supporting alcohol fuel blending. The American Petroleum Institute's own spokesman, Conger Reynolds, mocked the movement publicly, calling its supporters dream chemists and armchair farmers. By 1939, the Atchison Agrol plant closed its doors. 2,000 stations vanished from the map. An entire fuel infrastructure built by farmers for farmers erased in under 3 years. The only commercial plant fuel network in America was dead, destroyed in the same 24-month window that the Marijuana Tax Act killed hemp. Same war, same years, different weapons, same winners. But one community never stopped growing, and they never needed a single one of those stations. The Amish settled Lancaster County in the early 1700s. The first permanent settlers began planting hemp around 1710. By the 1720s, the Pennsylvania General Assembly was paying bounties for every pound of hemp produced fit for market.